small specimens, but perfectly adequate for spore prints of Psilocybe cubensis. And then the revolution in growing magic mushrooms at home began. And Psilocybe cubensis cultivation in the United States primarily started as in jars. The huge amounts of Mason and Kerr canning jars were being ordered, by the 100 case load directly from the factories. I'm sure that these two companies did not mind. And Psilocybe cubensis could be grown in a variety of ways. One of the more popular ways now in North America is in the months of July, August, and September, what we call leached cow manure, which is when they use separators to separate the roughage from the urea, and they spray back the urea slurry back onto the fields. They create these huge piles of roughage material. And many keen cultivators have discovered that these piles heat up naturally by themselves. They self-pasteurize. You can dig into these piles and bring them out. It's already ready-made compost. You add spawn to it, and then people go. This is outdoor cultivation with hoops and black plastic, or what we call remake cloth, which is a kind of a bug-out cloth. And you can do outdoor or bed cultivation and grow literally hundreds and hundreds of pounds outdoors, kind of semi-naturally. The advantage of this is you have entropy as an ally. Should you have insects coming in, they go away, and there's natural predators out there to the insects. So this is one of the more favored ways, and really not discussed by anybody in any book. That is the simplest way to, in a sense, fly under cover of the U.S. government, because the growing cycle is very short. It's outdoors. It doesn't kind of meet the description of a laboratory, underground drug laboratory. It's more in the garden environment, in amongst the vegetables, etc. So it's a very, very simple way of growing massive amounts of Psilocybe cubensis in a very, very short time. And you can grow it also on pasteurized wheat straw, as is shown here. More Psilocybe cubensis. When you're getting over about 4 pounds per square foot, or 2 kilograms, I don't know what it converts to in square meters, around 2 to 5 pounds per square foot of Psilocybe cubensis fresh weight. That's pretty much the average good yield. And when you're a master cultivator, you're getting 7 pounds per square foot, which is fresh weight. So that's almost 3/4 of a pound dry weight. Very significant. It's a beautiful mushroom. Many of you here have grown it and fallen in love with it. It is a majestic mushroom. And when the partial veil begins to tear, the first partial veil, that is a holy ceremony for many of us cultivators. Because as the first mushrooms develop and the first veil tears, you can watch it tear in about half an hour to an hour. And it's a joyous moment. And it's one that should always be celebrated. For those of you who are cultivators, I encourage you to pick up that ritual. So, and then there was a plethora of other books that came out. This is the Leonard Enos book, which was really, it was the first book, and I give him credit for that, but it was a terrible book. It was largely a rip-off of other people's work and had a lot of misinformation in it. But there was also some other books that were not very good. This is probably the next to the worst book ever published on mushrooms. And then this book here says that, you can use metol, which is a photographic reagent, and it stains mushrooms blue, then the mushrooms are psilocybin active. That's patently false. So there was a lot of misinformation that was being published. And then, in the course of the past 20 years, I've produced these books. This is my first field guide. This book now sold over 100,000 copies, and still sells more each year, which is like totally surprising to me because it came out in 1983. And this is the book that I'm very proud of, and it's 600 pages long, and it's mostly on the cultivation of gourmet and medicinal mushrooms. There is a section on the cultivation of Psilocybe mushrooms outdoors in that book as well. And then my more recent book, this one here, which literally sat in a drawer. Many of you have started big projects. Anybody who has written a book here knows, especially Christian's last book. I mean, that's a clear example. It nearly killed him writing it. That's no exaggeration. Because when you get involved in these projects, if you conceive the enormity of the entire project all at once, you'd never start it. But there's something about this subject, and these mushrooms inspire us, and these plants inspire us to give us the courage and the strength and the stamina to go on. So any of you who have built a house, who have done other books, my sympathy and empathy is with you, because it's a very lonesome project. No one really is there to do it but yourself. But it's the same thing as building a house in my mind. It's, So the number of mushrooms that more of the prominent species that I want to cover. This is a photograph by Jim Jacobs. This is Psilocybe mexicana, known as Teonenacatl, or God's flesh. This is one of the mushrooms that was revered by Mesoamericans for centuries prior to the invasion of the Spaniards, who brought cattle with them, and the Psilocybe cubensis is associated with the Spanish invasion. So Psilocybe cubensis traditionally in the past 50 years have been given to tourists, and Psilocybe mexicana and these other mushrooms are revered and used for private religious ceremonies by native peoples. So Psilocybe mexicana is what I call the liberty cap of Mesoamerica. It looks very, very similar to Psilocybe semilanciata. And Psilocybe mexicana can easily be grown. It produces sclerotia, which can be harvested, and they're like potato-like structures, and then you can bury them in soil, and then mushrooms come up. And this is one of the sweetest and dearest mushrooms that I've grown, because to me, it's like God touched the top of every mushroom, and it's like a sunburst. And I feel a strong affection for the species. Psilocybe tamponensis. We were at one of the coffee shops, and they had fresh sclerotia, Psilocybe tamponensis, right beside sushi. I mean, where else in the world can you get sushi and Psilocybe tamponensis sclerotia side by side? But in Amsterdam, I love this city. And it is very similar in appearance to the temperate relative Psilocybe semilanciata, which you have here in Holland. And Psilocybe semilanciata is a very safe mushroom to pick. It tends to grow exclusively in pasture lands, and there's very few poisonous species that are like it. It is a mushroom which does not bruise bluish very readily, and in fact quite rarely, but it has some other features that are uniquely specific to it. It has a separable gelatinous pellicle and an acute umbo, and I'll show those in just a second. And species that I have been blessed in that I've published now 4 novel species in the genus Psilocybe in scientific journals in Latin. And this is my answer to Psilocybe liniformis variety liniformis here in Holland. We have a variety called Psilocybe liniformis variety americana, which I published with Dr. Gaston Guzman in 1981. Psilocybe liniformis here in Europe has an edge that you can peel off with a pin. That's why it's called liniformis. It's got a white fringe that you can peel off the gill. And that is specific to that mushroom, and there's no other species that I know of that is similar to it. So this is one of the first species that I published. And then a species that was surrounded by a lot of taxonomic debate is one that was recently clarified, and we know this one is Psilocybe strictipes or strictipes. And this grows particularly in Oregon, where there's an enormous industry in growing grass seed for lawns and golf courses, etc. And there's no manure, and as a result, there's no cows and there's no fences. So it's a great place to go mushroom hunting because you can stop the car, and literally there's about a 20 to 30 mile band of farmland, so to speak, and about 100, 200 miles long where they grow the majority of grass seed for all the users in North America and elsewhere. This is fantastic too because in this photograph here, there's no exaggeration. There's probably several million mushrooms, which means all the spore mass is going into the soil. So as the seeds are being harvested later on, then that spore mass is being spread to golf